Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for attending today webinar. This webinar it's organized by Kuwait Accountants and Auditors Association. Today we have our keynote speaker, Dr. Awad Ibrahim. Dr. Awad Ibrahim has been a senior lecturer in accounting at the University of Portsmouth in the United Kingdom since 2016. As an active researcher, he has published in top-ranked journals and contribute scientifically to advance knowledge on risk disclosure, cost stickiness, emerging technology, and big data. Dr. Ibrahim served as an associate editor for the Accounting Research Journal from 2022 until now, and is currently an associate editor for the Journal of Sustainability Reporting and Accounting. He is a member of Harvard Business Review Advisory Council from 2021 until now. He is a regular reviewer for a leading journal such as the British Accounting Review. He welcomes a PhD application and research collaboration. Thank you so much, Dr. Awad, for accepting our invitation. You have 40 minutes and for your presentation, and then we'll open the floor for any questions. Please don't ask your question in the chat because the chat will keep rolling. So just wait, Dr. Awad, until he finish his webinar. Thank you, Dr. Awad. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ahmed, so much. Thank you for the invitation and for organizing such useful seminars. Could you please confirm that you can see my slides moving?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. Okay, so the topic of this research seminar is the cost stickiness, one of the top researched management accounting topics. So for your information, so far I have published 4 papers on cost stickiness, as you can see, and these papers that I am gonna present today is the 5th one. And for your attention as well, if you are interested to research on cost stickiness, this research project is available on our university website. It is a PhD proposal if you are interested to research this under my supervision. But please note that it is self-funded, so it is not a scholarship. It's just a research project, and I will be your supervisor with Rosa. So about these research papers, we have 4 primary objectives. The first one is to provide a theoretical framework. And based on our research, it is the first of its kind in the cost stickiness literature. This framework highlights the relationship between 2 main items, 2 main factors, cost stickiness and government exposure. And the second objective of this paper is to empirically test this framework assumptions. So after we design our theoretical framework, there are some assumptions and hypotheses, so we need to test the validity of this theoretical framework. The third primary objective is to identify channels through which government exposure affects cost stickiness, and the fourth one to test some variables that are likely to reduce the magnitude or the negative impact of cost stickiness in the high exposure business environment. First of all, we need to define what do we mean by the government exposure. Actually, here there are 2 main components of this item or of this definition. The first one is government agencies. What are the government agencies? According to Armstrong paper, which has been published in Journal of Accounting and Economics in 2024, she defined the government agencies as any department or agency or bureau that derive its supervisory or power from the federal government. So in short, it is any government agency. any government department, any government bureau, such as FDA, EPA, and Department of Justice. Of course, here I'm talking about the American context. And all these agencies and departments, not only in the US but worldwide, have general aims, such as fighting corruption, monopolies, and protect the financial markets. So this is our definition of the government agencies. What about the exposure? What do we mean by the government or the firm exposure to government agencies? Here we mean by the exposure any actions taken by those government agencies that could affect the firm. So for any firm, there is a number of agencies, government agencies, monitoring, reviewing, and following these companies or these firms. So the actions taken by those government agencies could affect the behavior or the policies of those firms followed or monitored by those government agencies. So here there is an example. In our sample, the sample for our study, we divided our sample into two main groups. The first group with high exposure and the second with a low exposure. What is the difference between both? The first group or the first subsample with a higher exposure includes all film firms followed or reviewed by a higher number of government agencies, while the other group with a low exposure includes all the firms monitored or reviewed or assessed by a lower number of government agencies. So here the government agencies is the key factor that can help us to differentiate the higher exposure or the low exposure. Some might ask me whether this exposure has a cost. Actually, yes, there is a cost on the firm. When your firm, the firm that you manage or own, is followed by a higher number of governmental agencies, what does it mean? It means that you have to follow the instructions, to follow the regulations set by the governmental agencies and the governmental officials, because those governmental officials will visit your firms day after day to ensure that the governmental regulations are satisfied and are applied. So this is the first part of our research paper, which is the government exposure. The second part, which is cost stickiness, and I am sure you have heard about it before because it has become common in the recent years. So what does it mean, the cost stickiness? The traditional cost model assumes that the cost behavior is linear. Okay, what does it mean? Linearity here means the cost response to the same change in the activity, okay, will be systematic or will be equal. Let me give you some examples. Here we have some examples in this table. All these studies, of course, this is a sample of hundreds of studies that examine the cost stickiness. The first one, which has been published in Journal of Accounting Research, has been conducted by Anderson. They examined the behavior of selling general administrative, and they found very interesting outcome, which is this. When the activity increases by 1%, the cost increases by 0.55. And when the activity decreases by 1%, the cost decreases by 0.35. Here you can see the cost response is not equal. The cost response is not the same. When I say activity, I mean the demand or the sales level or the sales revenues or volume. So when the activity change, increase or decrease by 1%, according to the traditional cost model, the cost response should be equal. However, these studies provided empirical evidence that the cost reaction is not equal. It is different. If you go down to study number 5, which I have conducted on the Egyptian market more than 10 years ago, I examined 3 types of costs: selling, general, administrative, cost of goods sold, and operating costs. And I found the cost of the first two, the behavior of the first 2 types of costs is sticky. Here you can see that for selling general administrative, the cost increased by 0.38, but decreased by only 0.08. So here we have a difference in the response equal 0.30. For cost of goods sold, the difference is 0.45. And for the operating costs, when the activity increased by 1%, I found that the operating cost is increased by only 0.91. But when the activity declined by 1%, the operating cost is reacted and decreased by higher amount, which is 1.03. Okay, so in this case, the second behavior here is called anti-sticky. So for the stickiness, we have two types, sticky and anti-sticky. This diagram, which has been published by Wies 2010, this paper is one of the pioneer papers in the cost stickness literature. It is published in the accounting review. Here you can see there are three lines. The first one, which is the straight thin line in the middle here, this refers to the traditional cost model. Okay, the cost increase equals the cost decrease for the same activity change. So here, this is a traditional assumption. But if you look at the bold line here, you can see that the cost behavior is not linear. Okay, so the cost increase is higher than the cost decrease for the same amount of activity change. And here, this phenomenon is known as sticky. The third situation is the anti-sticky, represented here by the dashed line. If you look at the dashed line here and compare the slope before and after, you will find that the cost increase is lower than the cost decrease for the same activity change. So here we have three cases of cost behavior: the traditional one, which is linear cost behavior, the sticky, and the anti-sticky. So this is the outcome of our first primary objective, which is to design a framework. And we are very pleased to introduce this framework as the first of its kind in the literature of cost stickiness. So let me explain this theoretical framework for you. We built this theoretical framework based on 5 different theories. I am going to explain each of these theories during my explanation of this diagram. So let me start. At the top here of this diagram, you can see our key variable of interest, which is the government exposure. So here we assume that we have a sample of companies followed by a higher number of governmental agencies. So in this case, the governmental exposure is very high. Why? Those companies are followed by a higher number of governmental officials, governmental departments or agencies. What is the result of that on those firms? The sample with a higher number of followers, governmental followers or governmental agencies. This will lead to intensive governmental monitoring because all those governmental officials will frequently visit those companies and they will review and assess their compliance with the governmental regulations. So here, the regulatory intensity will be higher. Regulatory intensity here refers to the number of regulations that those companies must follow and comply with. So governmental exposure, higher governmental exposure will lead to intensive governmental monitoring, and this will increase the regulatory intensity. And according to the regulatory compliance theory here, according to this theory, firms will have to comply with the governmental regulations. Why? To avoid the penalties. Sometimes, even in your personal life, you have to comply with the rules, with the regulations. Why? To avoid penalties. The same is true with the companies. So this is the first part of the first theory. The second theory and the third on the right-hand side, for our sample with higher exposure, the managers and CEOs and the boards of those companies will benefit from the frequent visits of the governmental officials. So every day we have an official from a governmental agency visiting us. So we will benefit from these frequent visits. What is the kind of this benefit? Those companies with higher exposure will build connections with the government officials, will start new government contracts, because this will benefit the firms at the end. According to the resource dependency theory, all companies worldwide must depend on external parties to support them. And the best external party to depend on is the government, because the government can support you with financial aids, with information if you need information, with even non-financial benefits. So according to the resource dependent theory, the firms with higher exposure to government agencies will benefit from this relationship with the government. And to secure and maintain, to secure the government support and resources and help, those companies will have to comply with the governmental regulations, and this will increase the compliance level. Okay, so here again to summarize this part, the firms with higher governmental exposure will have to comply more with the governmental regulations. Why? To avoid penalties, or to maintain government contracts, or to secure government support and financial aid and resources. What is the reflection of this behavior on the costs of the company? Here, the companies, to comply more, will assign and allocate and hire more resources to increase the compliance level. And the compliance cost will increase. This compliance cost is known by its commitment. What does it mean? It means that most, maybe more than 70 or 80% of compliance costs are long-term, committed, and fixed. What does it mean? It means that managers during the activity decline may not be able to get rid of such compliance resources. So it could be very difficult for the manager to get rid of the compliance resources. And this will increase the adjustment costs, which is a main reason for the cost stickiness. So when the adjustment costs are higher, this will lead to higher cost stickiness. And this is explained by the economic theory of cost stickiness provided by Banker in his paper published in 2013. Okay, so this is our diagram, which we claim that it is a contribution to the teacher. So here, this is the explanation of the diagram. So I don't want to repeat myself, but in simple words, here there are three reasons for why managers are highly unlikely to get rid of the slack resources. The first one, according to the real option theory, managers might prefer to wait in the hope that the demand recovers or the economic situation gets better. So during the economic recession, what is the natural reaction of manager? They should get rid of the additional resources. However, according to this theory, managers might prefer to wait and delay any redundancy plans or downsizing in the hope that the demand will recover and the economic situation gets better. And this will lead to cost stickiness. A second reason that the companies or managers may be reluctant to get rid of the slack resources is to maintain a good relationship with the government, is to secure government support, is to maintain the government contracts. If they reduce the compliance resources or the compliance level, this will dissatisfy the government, okay? Because they need to show the government that we are complying with the regulations, we are very, we are applying your regulation and so on. And one more reason for managers that they are unlikely to get rid of the slack resources is the nature of the compliance costs. It is by nature fixed, committed, and long term, and it is difficult to get rid of. Of course, in this paper, because of time, so I will move faster. So we created this diagram. It is simplified version. You can see here that we have two main variables. The one on the left-hand side is independent variable, the government exposure, and the one on the right-hand side is the compliance cost. We examine the impact of government exposure on the compliance cost. Considering two channels, the first one is the regulatory intensity. The second one is the government procurement contracts, the governmental contracts that each firm owns. And of course, here we examine the impact of higher compliance costs on the cost stickers, which is our cost, our dependent variable. Uh, about our sample, of course, we examined companies in the American market. Why? Because the data on the cost exposure is not available elsewhere. Only we found it available in the American market. The study period reduced from 1974 to 1999. Why? Because the data about disclosure was not available before 1999. The final sample, as you can see here, is 4,839 non-financial firms between 1999 and 2019. Okay, so here, someone might ask me why you have it chosen to examine costs, to examine selling general administrative. They are cost of goods sold and other categories of costs. Why selling general administrative? Actually, we have our reason. The first one, managers have greater freedom or discretion over cost over selling general administrative. For example, managers can increase or decrease salaries, can hire or fire people, can it change or modify, reduce or increase the marketing costs, administrative costs. So all these costs or most of these costs are controllable and manageable. Managers can control and change. Comparing it to costs such as outsourcing or production, this kind of costs are long term. It could be difficult to control and to manage. A second reason for our choice of selling general administrative is that sales volume is a key driver for selling general administrative. And also in our systematic review conducted 3 years ago, we found that more than 80% of the reviewed articles have chosen to examine selling general and administrative costs. Okay. However, besides choosing selling in general administrative costs, we also choose to examine operating costs as alternative cost category. Okay, so you might be aware of this model. It is introduced by Anderson in 2003. It is a very simple model, as you can see here. Model number one, we have two main variables. On the left-hand side, the look of a change in selling general administrative, and on the right-hand side, the look of a change in sales. Okay, and we have added the second independent variable, which is decrease dummy, which refers or measures the decrease in the costs, in the sales from year to another. We extended this model and generated model number two by adding our key variable of interest, which is JEE, stands for government exposure, and for five additional controls like the GDP, asset intensity, employee intensity, and free cash flow. And of course, we run the fixed effect regression with the standard errors clustered by firm. This table shows the measurement of the key variables of a study. Okay, I will explain only the measurement of one variable, which is the government exposure. Actually, we have followed this paper published in Journal of Accounting and Economics by Armstrong, and she measured the government exposure in this way. She counted the total number of sentences in the 10K. You know, the 10K is known in America. It is similar to the annual report, but in America, it is called 10K. So she counted the total number of sentences. And also she counted the number of sentences suggesting exposure to any governmental agency. So for example, if any sentence refers to or includes the name of agency, or any action taken by a governmental agency, it is counted. So in brief, they conducted textual analysis, content analysis to count the number of sentences suggesting exposure and divided this number by the total number of sentences in every 10K. And this was repeated for every year and every company. Okay, these are our baseline results. As I mentioned, the fixed effect regression with the standard errors clustered by firm was applied. And here in this table, you can see the baseline results. The first model here, you can see the results of two variables only. The first one, which is P1 sales change, it is positive. and significant. The second one is the decreased dummy. It is negative and significant as well. To know whether the cost behavior is sticky or not, there is a condition. What is this condition? The condition is that B1 should be significant and positive. B2 should be significant and negative. So here we can see that this condition has been satisfied. So we provide evidence that selling general administrative behavior or cost behavior in the American market is sticky. What about our variable of interest, which is the governmental exposure? We have added this variable in the second model and third one. In the second model here in the middle of the table, you can see the first independent variable is positive, the second is negative, and the third one highlighted in blue is negative and significant. Means what? There is a positive influence of governmental exposure on the cost stickiness. When the governmental exposure increases, the cost stickiness increases, consistent with our framework proposition and our study hypothesis. In model number 3, we have added standalone variables. So in the cost stickiness feature, some authors add standalones and others ignore the standalone. So here we have conducted additional analysis. Here you can see 4 different columns. The first column here, we replaced selling general administrative with operating costs, and we found the same result. If you look at the highlighted cell here in blue, you can see the variable is significant and negative, which means it has a positive impact on cost behavior or cost stickiness. In column number 2, we changed the method of regression from fixed effect to random effect, and we found the same result. In the third column, we used the 3-way fixed effect, the same result. And in the fourth column, here we added to our sample the financial companies, because in our means sample, all banks and financial companies were not included, but here we added all these financial institutions. And as you can see, across the 4 different regression models, the same result is there. Another important point here is what? Is the model that we applied to address the stickiness. In the first regression, we used the model of Anderson, but here we use 2 more alternative models. Here on the screen, there has been a model introduced by Balakrishnan in 2014, and this model is different from the model provided by or introduced by Anderson. The model of Anderson focuses on the log specification of both cost and sales. But this model was built on the percent change, or sorry, the percent of a change in revenues and costs. And here, as you can see from the result, we found the same result. Here, this model, the third model, was introduced by Wiz, and it is completely different from the first 2 models. Here, Wiz introduced this model to generate a new variable for the stickiness. The first 2 models, you can't know what is the amount of stickiness, but here in this model, you can know what is the amount of stickiness. For each firm year, you can identify the stickiness amount or magnitude. And here we have, after using this model, we generated a new variable and call it sticky, and use this as a dependent variable in the model and added the exposure as independent. And the result, as you can see here, a positive impact or a positive influence. Okay, additional analysis, as you can see here, we divided our mean sample based on the median of the variable of interest, which is the exposure. So we created 2 separate samples. The first one, which is the subsample with low exposure, which is represented here in number 1, column number 1. The stickiness doesn't exist, because to say that the cost behavior is sticky, the sales change should be positive and significant, and it is, while the decreased dummy is not. It is insignificant. So we can say that here the cost behavior is sticky. It is not a stick. But if you move to number 2, you can see that both the sales change and the decreased dummy both are significant, and the first is positive, the second is negative, which satisfies the cost stickiness condition. This means what? The cost behavior is sticky only in the firms with higher exposure, in the subsample with government exposure higher than the median. So it is another evidence that confirms our hypothesis. Additional analysis, which is the magnitude of cost stickiness. In the literature, there is a general assumption. Assume that managers react only when the change in the activity is higher than 10%. For example, in the activity is 3% or 4 or 5, it is highly unlikely that managers will take action because the change is very low. But if the change was 10% or higher, so it is highly likely that managers will react and make a decision. So here we divided our mean sample into two subsamples. The first one with sales change below 10%. And the second one, sales change above 10%. We found the evidence that the cost behavior is sticky only in the subsample where sales change is higher than 10%. And the influence of exposure is positive only in this subsample, confirming the literature hypothesis that managers react only to changes when they are above percent. Okay, the last additional analysis here is what is the type of the agency. In America, there are different types of governmental agencies. Here in this table, you can see 10 different agencies. We have it chosen those 10 different governmental agencies based on a result found by Armstrong. She found that those agencies that you can see on the table are the top most frequently mentioned agencies in the annual reports. Those are the top, the most frequently mentioned agencies. So here in this table, we run the same regression and the same analysis again, but on the agency level, on the agency by agency. Here they are 10, but only we found results consistent with our hypothesis in 4, which are highlighted in blue. You can see here below highlighted cells in for number 1, number 4, number 5, and number 8. Which means what? Which means that the influence of government exposure is not common. It could be restricted to a few number of highly influencing governmental agencies, which are FDA, CMS, FCC, and FTC. Okay. The last table here is the variables that are likely to reduce the influence of exposure on the cost stickiness. We examine 3 main things. We examine the influence of institutional investors. And you know there are 2 types of investors. We have it chosen dedicated, the institutional investors who own shares in companies more than 5 years. Okay, so they are not temporary or current. And also we have examined examined the impact of political lobbying and political action committee, whether the company has a political action committee or not, and board politically connection with whether any of the board members is politically connected, has a relation with someone in the government. And the fourth and the most important thing that everyone is researching these days is the influence of women on board, the women representation on board. What we found is this. We found that the influence of exposure on cost behavior or cost stickiness is common only in the subsample number 2 here, in the subsample with lower institutional investors. Okay. And also we found that the influence of exposure on cost stickiness is prevalent only when the firms don't have any political lobbying and when the firms don't have any political action committee. Okay, and when those firms don't have any political connection, and lastly, when the female representation on board is low. When the female representation on a board is low, here the cost stickiness is influenced by the government exposure. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your attention and for your time, and I am very happy to receive your questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Awad, for your presentation and for your time. Now we'll open the floor for any question. Please, if you have any question, raise your hand or you can write your question in the chat. If anyone have any question? All right, Dr. Awad, may you tell us about the contribution of this paper, plus the implication also about this paper, so it should be to be it clearer.
Okay, the contribution is this framework because from our systematic literature reviews that we conducted a few years ago, we didn't find any paper to date that examine such relationship, the impact of government exposure on cost stickiness. And this framework that you can see on the screen is the first of its kind. And I presented this framework in conferences and in platforms like yours to get a feedback and to get a criticism or I need someone to criticize it. So this can help me to refine and improve it. So far, this framework has been updated several times. It has been changed from its first version. So I consider this a contribution, major contribution, in addition to the empirical evidence of that we presented on the relationship here, as you can see. So we are the first to provide empirical evidence on the influence of exposure on the cost stickiness. So we didn't provide or design a framework and that's it. We provided our framework and we examined the propositions and hypotheses of this framework so everyone can get convinced of our theory and our propositions.
Thank you so much. We have a question from Dr. Gokberg from American University of the Middle East. Here's a question. Did you consider using public governance and law system variables?
The question, could you raise the question because it is not clear to me? Could you repeat it, please?
Can you, please, Dr. Gokberg, can you open the mic and ask Dr. Awad directly, please?
Assalamu alaikum, Doctor.
Alaikum salam.
Doctor, since you used the GDP as the macroeconomic variable, did you consider using the public governance like the world governance indicators and the law system?
No, actually, we haven't used such variables. Why? Because our models are focused on the most common controls used in the teacher. For example, if you look at the model examined and introduced by Anderson in 2003, you will find it very short, just 5 variables. So we followed this approach, and the same is repeated by a Banker and by Banker 2013, Banker 2014, and Chin et al. 2012. Okay, so we have chosen these variables based on the teacher. They are the most common control variables. And also in related to this question, because this study is not multi-country study, it is only examining one country, which is the US. So we haven't used any proxies to consider the differences in culture or law system in different countries. It is only America. Hopefully I answer your question.
I understood, but you used the GDP. That's why I assumed, because I attended the meeting late. So I assumed that you are using multiple countries because you have the GDP variable. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. This is okay. You know what? We have used the GDP for one reason. In this paper, in this paper, which is number 1, economic growth and cost stickiness. This is my first paper on cost stickiness, and I provide evidence that the cost behavior is affected by the economic situation, whether it is economic growth or economic decline or recession. So that's why we have used the real GDP here to consider the economic situation of one country, which is America, not to differentiate between different countries. So because even Anderson himself used a variable which is the GDP as a control variable in his model. Okay, so here we use this to distinguish between the years with economic growth and the years with economic recession or high economic status and low on the firm, oh, sorry, on the country level, one country level only.
Okay, thank you so much, Doctor. Good luck with the publication.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Koper. All right, Dr. Awad, also I have another question regarding your publication about this specific topic, which is the sickness. Now, most of your papers, you just when you talk or when you write about this topic, you are concerned or focus on just one country only. So, for example, Egypt, and this, I think, literature review and systematic review. And finally, right now, the paper you just presented about US. So why didn't do it across country, for example, or MENA country, Middle East? I don't know.
Yeah,
Europe,
this is a good suggestion. I will consider, of course, in my future research. But the first 3 papers that you can see on the screen have been conducted while I was in Egypt before moving to the UK. In Egypt and in other developing countries, the access to international data is very difficult. But here at Portsmouth University, we have 3 different databases. We have Bloomberg, we have Econ, and the Capital IQ. So the access to international data is easier than before. So the first 3 papers have been published before 2018. The fourth paper is systematic and it is international study, including all the literature around the world. The fifth one, which is the government exposure, has been conducted on America, and there is one more on America as well. So it is a matter of availability of data. But yes, to my knowledge, I haven't seen any paper on cost stickiness in the MENA countries or GCC so far. So it could be a contribution if any of the attendees interested in such topic. So you can start working on examining cost stickiness in the MENA countries.
Doctor, what about the implication of this paper?
Okay, the implications of this paper, they are, political implications, which is what? The frequent visits of government officials, okay, could affect the firm policies, could affect the firm behavior, could affect the firm outcomes. So here the political politicians, let me say politicians, and other related things. For example, the political connection, political lobbying. This table shows this. Let me go faster to this table. So all these political items that are mentioned in this table, for example, the political lobbying, political action committee, and the board political connections, all these variables could affect the board policies or board decisions. And as we can see here, higher firm exposure leads to unwanted or unfavorable cost behavior, which is a cost stickiness. So this is a message to politicians to reduce their pressure on the CEOs, on the manager, on the top management, because this pressure could affect the firm's policies or cost behavior negatively. Okay, so this is one of the main implications of our results, which is the influence of the politics. And the cost exposure or the government exposure is one of these.
Thank you so much, Dr. Awad, for your answer all the questions. If anyone have any question, Anyone have any question? Anyone? Thank you so much, Dr. Awad. I know it's one of, for me, it's one of يعني tougher question, tougher topic, and very complicated for me. It needs really a lot of reading regarding the stickiness topic. It's really a good topic. I know there is a contribution. If I connected with several staff, for example, corporate governance, earning management, maybe fair performance, and other topic, and also the context, as you said, from middle country, MENA countries, Africa. I think there is a lack of paper in this topic as well. I really appreciate your time and your presentation. Good luck for your paper and wish you all the best. Inshallah, it will publish in high-ranked journals.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you.
Any last word before we end this seminar?
Thank you for organizing such useful seminars. And only if any of that is interested to research, I am happy to take part in any research on cost stickiness. Also, this project, if any PhD candidate is interested to research cost stickiness, I am available, and this project is available online, but again, it is self-funded. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Awad, and have a good evening, everyone, and see you, inshallah, next time in another seminar. Thank you, Dr. Awad, and see you, inshallah, next time, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.